Hi and welcome to the Geek Legion of Doom. This is a B-movie review and I'll be having a look at Attila. So this is a Asylum picture. Now if you've seen Asylum films you're going to know exactly what type of film this is. Very, very low budget B-movie. Now Asylum normally do these kind of mockbuster films which are basically kind of rip-offs ultimately of the kind of the mainstream films that happen to be at this sort of cinema that's at the same sort of time. But this one's more of an original idea obviously. So I guess the hook of this one is you have the kind of UFC star Cheick Kongo starring in this movie, and he's kind of playing one of the bad guys. Now on the cover it actually says he's playing Attila himself, but he isn't. He is kind of the main character, or the main bad guy I suppose, but Attila is actually another guy in it. So we have a prologue basically showing us that Attila is ultimately this kind of, this conquering warlord and everything. It's obviously not very historically accurate. And he's after this kind of ultimate power called the Staff of Moses, which is basically an artifact that can kind of raise the dead and give sort of supernatural powers. And he and his sons, one of which is played by Cheick Kongo, who's just literally known as Nomad, basically kind of trying to seek out this power and ultimately get their hands on it. And sort of cut to modern times, and we found out that the US military, although we assume they're the US military because they don't really look very much like actual military uniforms and things like that. They literally got black t-shirts and things like that. But anyway, they managed to get their hands on this power and unwittingly sort of resurrect basically the Nomad, who is the son of Attila. And he kind of goes on the rampage ultimately, and he's kicking everyone's ass in this kind of woodland area. And towards the end of the movie, so mild spoiler, we find out that kind of this general in the US military may have kind of his own sort of ideas about what to do with this kind of this sort of supernatural artifact, and then we actually see Attila himself sort of resurrected from the grave, and there's two of them ultimately. Now that's pretty much it. Now the story of this one is of course extremely ridiculous. It doesn't really make a lot of sense, but I don't think it's you really are going to expect that coming from an Asylum picture. It really is just sort of slapped together. Now I will say one positive thing about this film, and I guess it's the fact that obviously that you have kind of this UFC guy there. No, I'm not familiar. I don't really watch UFC, so I'm not actually familiar with the fighters and stuff. But I will say this: the fight choreography isn't actually all that bad. And there's actually some decent sort of fight scenes that are kind of fairly well shot, and actually are quite quite interesting and exciting to watch. But that really is it. That's the only sort of positive thing I can actually say about this movie. Everything else about it is just ridiculous. So I've mentioned obviously the story in itself is just entirely stupid, but the acting is just terrible sort of across the board. Now Cheick Kongo himself really doesn't say anything, so he's kind of more of just obviously a physical presence. But the actors who are around him, these kind of military types, are just cartoonish, just cartoon characters. I mean, they kind of, have you ever watched the A-Team? It kind of reminds me a little bit of that sort of style of sort of campy cheesiness ultimately. But nowhere near as good as the A-Team, don't get me wrong. But just everything, it's just a very, very cheap movie. The sort of sets are particularly boring. The majority of the movie, as I say, is pretty much set just in this woodland area. So I don't have to sort of pay for sort of sets and things like that. You have a kind of scene in this sort of military base sort of towards the end. It's just not a particularly interesting film, unfortunately. I say aside from kind of a few sort of fight scenes here and there, there's sort of a couple of visual effects, which I suppose aren't terrible for kind of a very low budget movie. The actual effects that you have on these kind of resurrected Huns basically are kind of, well, they almost kind of look like supernatural beefed up zombies. So I guess it's maybe a little bit of a curiosity if you're a kind of a B-movie connoisseur. But like I say, it does err on the particularly cheap and cheesy side. So I really can't give this film too much of a recommendation. So I'm just going to give it a 2 out of 10 because it really isn't a particularly great movie. Have you seen it? What your thoughts are? Leave a comment. I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.